All right. Hello, all my students out there. Going over economics class for today, and we'll start out with a bell ringer. And your bell ringer asks, or actually describes a market or industry, because you see that the notes and the activity for today will be market structures. And so, a market or industry is all the businesses that make a particular type of product. For example, Coca-Cola and Pepsi are companies in the soft drink market. And so I'm asking you to list three companies that would be in the automobile market, and then list two companies that would be in the shoe market. And that's just to get everybody warmed up to the idea of what we mean by a market or industry. And so let's go through a couple terms. We probably won't get through all these today, but we'll see how far we can go. Your test is going to be on Friday. All right. Your test is going to be on Friday, I believe, right now. And so your first term is a market structure. When we talk about the market structure, what we mean is we're going to talk about the nature and degree of competition among firms in that market. And so, for example, the soft drink industry, we'll see how competitive that market is. How many competitors are there in that market, and how equally is their share of that market split up? That would be the market structure. And we can put it into four different groups. And so some groups are less competitive and have less market control, and some groups have a large number of competitors or a small number of competitors. And so those four market structures are perfect competition, monopolistic competition, which is where most markets and industries are, an oligopoly, and a monopoly. And so those are the four market structures we'll discuss today. The first one's perfect competition. This is where there's a very large number of small firms, and they're all producing an identical product. And so some examples of this would be agricultural markets. And so you think about a farmer grows a crop, it's going to be identical or very, very similar to other farmers that also grow that crop. And so their products are the same or identical to any of their competitors. Currency, gasoline, milk, those things are all the same, no matter what company or firm is selling that product. They're identical products. And so that's a big thing to remember with perfect competition, because it's what makes it unique, is they're all selling identical products. Also, there's no barriers to entry. And so if you wanted to go out and start a farm and start growing a crop, you could do that. And that means there's nothing stopping you. There's no barrier that is stopping you from entering that market. You're able to go out and enter that. In perfect competition, those firms are price takers. And what that means is that firms have no control over what price of their product is. They have to take whatever the market price is, and they can't change that. And so there's a great video here. If you haven't watched that, you should go back and watch that. Now, the other three market structures are considered imperfect competition. So that means it's going to lack one or more of the conditions required for perfect competition. And most of the time, that condition is going to be that identical products don't exist anymore. And so monopolistic competition, this is where there's still a large number of competitors. And so with perfect competition, you could think thousands. With monopolistic competition, you can think there's hundreds of firms now selling similar products, but those products are now differentiated. And so that means that there's some differences between competing products. And so they're not identical anymore. It's still pretty easy to enter and exit the market. And so there are few barriers or low barriers to entry. Because there's so many firms trying to compete in this market, you could also jump in and compete. And this is also where non-price competition begins to flourish. And so non-price competition means that they're not changing the price to get you to increase the demand for their product. And so non-price competition includes advertising, giveaways, other promotions that are going to try to increase the demand for their product. So some examples of these markets would be pizza. You think about all of the pizza companies out there, there's a lot of them, and they're pizza, but their pizzas are different. And so that's where the differentiated products comes into play. You see a lot of non-price competition here, advertising, commercials, soft drink industry, grocery stores, car wash. They all offer a similar product, but it's a little bit differentiated. It's different. Again, another great video. If you haven't seen it, pop it open, watch it. There's a term here, laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is a French term meaning leave it alone, allow them to do. I always think of the Beatles when I think of laissez-faire, like let it be. And so that means that economies function best when the government does not interfere. And so if you hear the term laissez-faire economics, what that means is that the government is hands off and that firms are allowed to compete by themselves without government interference. Now, the government does have some roles, of course, protecting property. We talked about patents, enforcing contracts, settling disputes, providing protection against foreign competition. Those are all roles that a government can still play and it be considered laissez-faire economics. And then your other market structures, oligopoly. Oligopoly, there's just a few sellers that are going to dominate the industry. And so if we were to break this down as a percentage of market share, you could say when the largest 4 firms in an industry control 40% or more of the market. And so 40% might not be a whole lot, might not sound like a whole lot, but it is a whole lot. It gives those 4 firms a lot of power and control over price. There's even more non-price competition here. And so you think of all the commercials that you see, a lot of those are in market structures that are oligopolies. And then these firms are price makers. Like I said, they have a lot of power over what the price is. And so because there's so little competition and there's just a few competitors, it's possible that firms could get together and do some price fixing. And that would be where they agree to charge same or similar prices for their product. And so it's easier for those firms to collude. And what I mean by collusion is a formal agreement to work together to reduce competition. And so this could easily happen in an oligopoly. And this is something that is not good for competition. If firms are getting together to set prices or to work together, think about who businesses and firms are working against at that point. Well, they're working against consumers. And so these firms would band together to try to charge a higher price or act in some other way that it would not be a benefit to consumers. And then the last one is a monopoly. A monopoly, there's only one seller of a particular product. And so in this case, the product is unique because there's only one seller of it. And so that's the thing that kind of sets a monopoly apart, is there's just one seller, their product is very unique. Now monopolies have the least amount of competition. And so monopolies are rare because competition is a good thing. Competition drives innovation. Competition drives us to make better products and new products. And if there's no competition, we don't have that drive, that motive anymore. And so monopolies are rare, but there are some near monopolies. So markets that are really close to being a monopoly. You think of public utilities like gas, water, and electricity. Well, if you live in Winchester, you really only have one company that you can buy gas for your house for, or water for your home, or electricity for your home from. There's only really one option. And so that would be a monopoly. The U.S. Postal Service has a huge share of mail. And so you think of that as a monopoly. De Beers is a huge supplier of diamonds. And so that is a near monopoly. And then you think of some geographic monopolies, and this is just where there's an absence of other sellers in that area. And so an example would be a professional sports franchise. So if you were going to watch an NFL game and it's in the state of Indiana, there's one team you're going to watch play. You're going to have to watch the Colts play, and then you're going to watch them play against who they're playing against. But you're going to a Colts game if you're going to an NFL game in the state of Indiana. The same if you're going to an NBA game, you're going to a Pacers game. Or if you're going to a WNBA game, you're going to a Fever game. All right? And so those are geographic monopolies. And with monopolies, there are very high barriers to entry. And what that means is if that you are going to enter that market, it's going to be extremely difficult because you are battling against a giant. And so there are high barriers to entry in a monopoly. And we're talking about factors that prohibit firms from entering an industry. And one reason why it's difficult to enter a market that is controlled by a monopoly is because of economies of scale. And so as a firm increases in size, its costs are reduced. And so think about if a firm is really big and they get really efficient at producing a product and they're producing a large number of it, they're going to have lower costs than if you try to jump in and start at a smaller scale. Patents could also create a monopoly. And we talked about a patent, especially we saw one in the movie Flash of Genius. And a patent's an exclusive right of an inventor to use his or her invention for 20 years. And so I think you should highlight that 20 years in your notes and make sure it goes with patent. There's some other legal barriers to entry, like a copyright. It's going to protect works of authors or artists. License. Government can limit entry into an industry by requiring a license before opening a business. And so I can't just slap a taxi sign on my vehicle and say, okay, I'm going to be a taxi now and charge people for rides. All right, I have to actually go through and get a special license for that. All right, guys, thanks for stopping in. See you soon.